Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go, man. Hunt the ball. Let's go, family on three. 1, 2, 3, family.
Hello, football family. Welcome into Huddle It Up Films NFL Draft Barbecue. That's Big Board Questions. And today I have a very special guest. You probably know him, Ken McKusick, Film Study Ravens, Film Study Baltimore. He is our guy, so much experience. And I'm going to use this opportunity to focus in on the top 10 players in this draft, at least as I have them listed, get Ken's opinion. How do we order these guys? There are needs for the Ravens, obviously, at outside linebacker. There are needs for the Ravens, obviously, at cornerback. So when we're trying to sort these players out, who comes first on the big board? Who would you take if two of these players somehow happen to fall? So, Ken, first of all, thank you so much for joining me. And at the beginning here, much like on your show, I just would like to ask you to plug your work and hint, our big draft show coming up.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on, Jason. It's always a pleasure to talk football with you. We always go on way longer. We're talking about how long this might take us, and I'm thinking, 35, 40 minutes. I'm taking the over on that just after starting this conversation. I know we're going to have a lot of fun with it. So coming up this on the 28th, 29th, and the 30th, all 3 days of the draft, Jason and I will be participating as panelists in the same Zoom call. Jason has a big board. I'll be kind of moderating the thing, but don't think of me that way. I'm really just one of the panelists. We'll be including fans in this. We'll have an opportunity to interact. Sarah Ellison, Gabe Ferguson, Jordan Coe, Coach Evans, who a lot of people I'm sure know. Somebody I'm forgetting here that's important that I should not forget.
Alec is
of course, Alec Poulianis of Ravens Recap. So got some great people on who are gonna be a lot of fun to talk to during the draft. It's a very casual, relaxed atmosphere. When I say casual, I mean screaming at the TV set over the fact that some player got picked or other player didn't get picked, and that affects the Ravens situation. Very Ravens-centric draft coverage, so we'll be looking forward to that. Every pick, it's about how does that impact the Baltimore Ravens. It's not about how does that impact the Jacksonville Jaguars, who we could really care less about, or some human interest angle about the Jacksonville Jaguars and how their draft pick is associated with Jacksonville somehow. We don't care about that stuff. We get directly to, it's great that a quarterback gets taken. Always love to see that come off the big board when you don't need a quarterback. Let's get to the Raiders pick and hope they are as bad as last year kind of thing. It's all very, very fun stuff. Jason mentioned filmstudybaltimore.com. Please come over and visit. We got draft pods, including two with Jason, that are, I think, just wonderful. They're great conversations with people I'm close friends with, and very good discussions about football that I really enjoyed, and 10-1 countdowns at every position. We'll be kind of going back to this, I think, on tonight's show, right?
That's right. We have a 10-1 theme. And it's just kind of coincidental for me, Ken, because when I take the players at the top of my board, it happens to be 10 of them this year that I put in a different tier. And Ken has not seen my top 10. So many of the people on the barbecue so far have looked over my list and told me who they wanted to talk about. Well, Ken, here at the barbecue today, he's flying blind, and we're just going to reveal our top 10s one at a time and see how we prioritize these guys. Because again, Ken, so many needs for the Ravens, and it kind of adds up with these top 10s as far as the most talented players and the Ravens' needs.
Yeah, you did actually send me the 10 players in your top 10 in no particular order, and I have set my own order of those top 10. So we're comparing how we would rank the same 10 players. So
there you go. Well said. So, Ken, I have a question I've been asking everybody. I didn't prep you for this, so I hope you don't mind.
No, go to it.
It's about your barbecue, Ken, at a barbecue. So you might have noticed Dev was here. He was the first one here. We had some coffee. Just had Coach Evans on. It's the middle of the barbecue now. So tell me about Ken McKusick, Mr. Film Study at a barbecue. Do you like to host? Do you like to go? What is the vibe like? What are you eating? Are you drinking anything? Does Ken do any dancing? These are all things that the people want to know, Ken. So go ahead.
I've never been the grill guy, really, lifetime. Maureen really handles everything like that. She handles a lot of things at our house and is a wonderful person. But I think the unusual thing I talk about that she cooks on the grill is pizza. So one of the things I really like, really well done, crispy pizza. We can't get it done in our oven. The oven doesn't get hot enough. So you cook it on the grill instead. And it's actually, she's come up with a way to do that that's very effective and cooks the pizza well. So we really like it that way. And you people may have seen pictures on Twitter of just about how much garlic I like on my pizza too. But that's my kind of favorite type.
Well, Ken, that is revolutionary, sir, because I would imagine, like, just thinking you would have to put that up with like the sausages and the hot dogs on the top row so it doesn't get so burnt. So Maureen manages to do it on the bottom where she has space.
I really don't know. So I haven't been out there watching. I know we have a decent sized grill out back that she can work on, but she's the maestro and I do not invade her turf.
Yes, I am not allowed to invade the kitchen when it's that time myself. That's her role. She takes it very personally. So it's not the fact that I don't want to help Ken. I'm not going on some kind of chauvinistic
Sure.
range here, but when she says she does the groceries and she does the kitchen, my wife means that. So she doesn't want me in there messing it up, sir.
That's good. I mean, division of duties is fine, and Maureen is as most people know, so incredibly central to my efforts on football. Helps me score offensive line play. A lot of things with the defense she does. She scores who's in the game in the defensive backfield when we're at a football game, which is actually a little bit of a challenge to do. But without it would make the after work much harder. So shout out to Maureen for all she does for us.
Yeah, shout out for Maureen. I love her and I never even met her because that's a lot going on, Ken. That's a lot going on. And then, of course, you produce your content right after the games or closely after the game. So how important, what a time saving and what an effective method to have someone in the house that you can count on. So Ken, when I sent you those 10 names, before we dig into ordering them, I wanted to ask you, is there anybody that I omitted from the top 10 that you would include, or vice versa? Do you not even have 10 guys that you would put in this category?
Yeah, it is a question. I might have had one guy that I would have dropped into number 11, who I actually ended up with number 9 on my list for the Ravens. Another guy clearly belongs in the top 10. I just don't think he does the Ravens as much good as he do another team. So we've got a little bit of that going on, but it's not much. And I'm happy to order these 10 players.
Okay, well, kick us off, Mr. McKusick. Who would you put at number 10? And I'm going to leave my big board down for this episode and just flash the names
Sure.
up with some other graphics. So go ahead, Ken. Who do you have as number 10?
Absolutely. Well, number 10, a lot of people think he's the best player in the entire draft, and that's Kyle Hamilton of Notre Dame. The issue is not that Kyle Hamilton is not a great football player. I have a couple of concerns about him, particularly speed related. But in terms of his ability to be aware on the football field, no concerns of that sort. My only problem is he doesn't exactly fit the Ravens after the signing of Marcus Williams. And part of the problem here is that Marcus Williams, you spend $70 million on, and that $70 million can be a good investment if it keeps the Ravens from investing a number 1 draft pick at the position. And the free safety position, as we found, very difficult position to go out and find a guy with anything but a number 1 draft pick and any kind of hope that it works out on a regular basis. So I think the Ravens, made a good franchise building choice with regard to signing Williams. I really like it in that regard, and they would be undoing some of that if they spent a lot more on Hamilton. Now, Hamilton, a different cat in a lot of ways. A lot of people say more like Derwin James at his size, at what he can bring you off the edge as a rusher, and I'm not denying that. I just don't think the Ravens can afford to have as much money spent at safety as they would if they had both of them in-house. The Ravens also a very versatile group of safeties after Williams. I hope they keep Williams in center field. And I think that with the current set of safeties that the Ravens have, and I'm really including Stone and Jefferson and Clark in that group, can do a great job of being the 4 safety alignment that I hope the Ravens will go to on 3rd down this year. So Hamilton, love him as a player. My only concern is about size. I kind of question, if he can be truly used the same way James was as a rookie as a pass rusher, but he'll be a great player in the NFL, and he certainly belongs in the top 10 overall. I just have him number 10 as who the Ravens need.
Very good. Hamilton's a great player, and as you mentioned, it's getting harder and harder to find a free safety. You're either going to have to pay for him, or as you were alluding to, you're going to have to spend draft capital, very valuable draft capital, where you could be drafting a tackle or a corner or another really impact position instead of having quarterback, right, instead of a safety. So Hamilton, for me, I actually have him at number 9 on my big board. I have one player below him, and that has more to do with the player's question marks, upside versus question marks for that particular player, who I'll be revealing in a second. But agreed, Hamilton would be much higher on my list and skip some of these other guys if Marcus Williams wasn't signed, Ken. But I still have him in my top 10 because you can't complain with a good, versatile defensive back. He deserves to go in the top 10. And, hopefully for him, teams will value what he brings to the table.
Alrighty, sounds good. So who's your number 10 guy?
So my number 10 guy is actually Derek Stingley. And the question mark should be obvious for anybody who's followed the draft. Stingley, of course, came on as a freshman, 18, 19 years old, and dominated the SEC. His talent is just blast off the screen at you. When you're doing that on a championship level run and making that many plays, his talent is undeniable. But it's well documented he didn't follow that up in 2020 or 2021 with that same level of play. He has a Liz Frank that he was coming off of, Ken, which was holding me down on him. But he ran a 4.37 at his pro day, so I can't really hold that against him. I actually removed the red cross, which is a injury tag designation on my board. So you run a 4.37, I'm not concerned about your health, really. But I have him at 10 just behind Kyle Hamilton because of the unknown. So what do you make about Stingley and his uneven performance from dominating in 2019 and then what happened the last 2 years?
Aside from the injury, it was my biggest question about him as well. He did also have a high missed tackle rate. I don't know if you caught onto that. 17.9% career. That's per PFF. I don't know what to make of that. That's obviously something the Ravens wouldn't be very happy about. Let's talk through a few other things, though. I don't really think he's been that bad in coverage in the years since 2019. He didn't have gaudy numbers, but in 2019, he actually gave up 6.6 yards per target. He gave up 5 touchdowns. He just had 6 interceptions also. Those turnovers are worth an awful lot. So I'm not minimizing that in any way. But since then, he's actually averaged only allowing 6.0 yards per target. It's even better in the couple of years since. I had to talk with Coach Evans about this because he's an LSU fan. And what he said to me was he thought Stingley kind of got bored after the dynasty kind of broke up, the big receivers left, and he didn't have as challenging a practice to go to. I don't think it's a great excuse, but it may actually explain the thing. For whatever, I certainly hope Stingley recovers his love of football at the NFL level because he could be quite a talent. The 437 answers the question I had about is the injury over. I certainly think that's a good indication that he'll be okay in 2022 to play. The only other thing that I had about him that I wasn't really good with was the arm length was a little short. He's 30 and 5/8. It's not ideal for contested catches. Talk about that with cornerbacks a lot when you're close, and a player like Stingley is going to be close on a deep receiver a lot. Jump balls occur. Those extra 2 or 3 inches that the really long corners can have versus the shorter ones can make a lot of difference in terms of getting tip balls and whatnot. Vertical is also important for that too. But Stingley, a guy I still like, and the Ravens need it. Cornerback is great if they got him. They'd probably be kicking Humphrey to the inside. I'm not totally crazy about that, but that's probably really true with anybody. Most of the top corners that they can get in this draft, they'd probably be pumping Humphrey to the inside, where he's, in my opinion, a little less value. Anyway, long and the short of it is I had Stingley at number 7.
Okay, number 7. Love it. Going to note that down here. The only thing that's holding me back, Ken, is that the disinterested, not being able to see good tape for that long. But I'm going to have to be honest with you now. I have Stingley at 10, and my number 9 is going to be Hamilton, as I mentioned. I could see those two switching before draft day, before we go on the show just over a week from now, just because of the need factor that you alluded to. And I had him at 10, due in part to the Liz Frank injury and the injury question. With that now removed, I think there's a good chance that I'll have Stingley one spot higher on my board. So you have Hamilton at 10. Who do you have at number 9?
Yeah, so my number 9 guy, tough choice because these are a lot of great football players I've chosen. But I thought Jermaine Johnson is the guy. I had other. I thought long and hard about 7, 8, 9 at least. He Iron Man play, so I love that first of all because there's a possibility for upside there if he could play a few less snaps and be even fresher. But he played 61 snaps per game in 2021. The 34-inch arms, the 458, the explosiveness in terms of vertical and broad, they're all there in terms of the measurables. You look at the game he had against Notre Dame specifically, put it all on display. I mean, he's all over the field in terms of anticipation. I think he actually keeps pretty decent integrity at the line of scrimmage. It's not something you often hear touted among his most positive things, but he does a very good job of maintaining containment on plays pretty well. So I thought that was good. He does have the reputation as a really outstanding edge setter. I do think that's apparent more in terms of his ability to manipulate the tackle. He's so quick that tackles overreact. And I always said this about Odafe Oweh last year, is that every offensive tackle he ever faces in his life is going to be not as good an athlete as he is. What that means is that probably every one of them or a lot of them are going to overreact to his first move. And Jermaine Johnson's able to manipulate a tackle like that. That's something that I really value. It's easy to see the way he can fan out a tackle. And we saw that in a lot of games. It wasn't just Notre Dame, but he can create B-gap blitz opportunities. And Ravens last had that in spades with Elvis Dumervil. They had it with Ngakoue too, not for very long, but a guy who likes to line up wide, a guy who can really fan out an offensive tackle and create a B-gap opportunity for the slot. It could be for the safety. It could be for an inside linebacker. But the point is that a team that is very scheme-dependent in terms of their rush, guess we don't really know whether the 2022 Ravens will be that or not, since it's McDonald and not Wink, would really benefit from having a guy like that. I think you can project Jermaine Johnson as a Sam. You're probably, from all these points, you're probably getting the idea that I would be thrilled to get this guy at 14 if there was any way he dropped there. I don't think he will. But to me, he's probably number 9 on this list, which just makes it a fantastic list of players the Ravens might get.
It is, Ken. To me, it is too. Now, the thing I love about Jermaine Johnson is his eyes, instincts, and it shows up in everything that you just mentioned there. He can play the strong side for sure. He's a guy that you want at the point of attack in a run game because it's effortless to him to be able to position himself, see what's going on, see through the tackle that's trying to block him, and then make a play. Eyes and instincts are my number one. Ken, I'm sure I've rambled on your show enough about it, but I care more about their eyes and instincts than their 3-cone or their 40 time because it helps a player play faster than what they actually are in the track event. So how do you feel about Jermaine's eyes, instincts, or anything you want to add there?
Yeah, he's very quick in terms of recognition. I think he's also kind of patient in terms of controlling gaps. So I was positive on both those. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we talk about 40 times and they differ by, 0.15 seconds, and we think like that's a big deal. But then you watch Josh Bynes and Patrick Queen play the same position, and you realize the play speed for this old man who ran a 4.840 a decade ago is still much higher than this younger guy who doesn't really know where he's going on a football field a lot of the time. So it's a very big difference in it, and it applies to an awful lot of positions. Safety is a big one where instincts mean a whole lot more than raw speed a lot of the time.
Yes, and with Kyle Hamilton, lots being made of his 4.7 40 or whatever the exact number was, and you just watch the 40, Ken. He's running almost outside of where the dotted lines were. Like he was the furthest thing from running a straight line as you could possibly get. Yet on a football field, he understands exactly what angle he needs to take. He's got a little bit of that. He's not Ed Reed. It's got to always state that, but he's got that knack that you see from Geno Stone and Ed Reed, where he can banana angle to the ball and make a play. And then he's also got that feel, Ken, when he knows he can get to the ball instead of the corner, or he's got the best shot at the ball, where he will just not do the banana angle, head right towards the ball and make a play on it, toe tap at the sideline. So yes, just another example. So I just had Coach Evans on, actually, just spoke with him. And the thing that's holding him back on Jermaine Johnson, so I would like you to address this, please, is that he doesn't see a dominant player. He sees a solid player, a player he would take at 14. So he's not
Mhm.
saying it's out of our range. But do you see Jermaine Johnson as like a dominant, a Pro Bowl type player? Say, however you want to phrase it. Go ahead and give me what you think of Jermaine's upside.
There are areas for growth. One of them being, a little bit less use at the NFL level could improve his lack of fatigue and whatnot. Probably improve him as an edge setter. Definitely improve him as a pass rusher to have fewer snaps on the field. The 34-inch arms and the 458 speed just aren't stuff you can teach, and not all edges have it. There are some edges. Odafe Owe was faster. He learned things at the NFL game, at the NFL level, which really helped. I think Jermaine Johnson probably knows most of what he's going to know about football. I think some of the things will be in terms of usage and situationally how they take advantage of who he is. But he does a lot of things really well. I guess if I had to say that in response to Coach, I would say that if the concern is that he's quite polished right now, I agree. He's pretty polished among these edge rushers that is here, and that could be a concern. It's also a reason why he's going to step in right from the very first day and be a good player, I think.
I agree. So, Ken, we have for your list, we have Kyle Hamilton at number 10. We have Jermaine Johnson at number 9. I have Stingley and Hamilton in those spots. So, would you go ahead, please, and tell me who you have at number 8?
Let me go back and make sure I know who that is. Yeah, it's Trayvon Walker. And another one, tough call because huge upside. And I love upside players too. And in dealing with Walker and Johnson, it was a hard choice there because I love who Johnson is right now. I love who Walker could be enough more that I put him ahead in terms of the list of who I would take. Probably, I think I would argue, other than one other that we'll get to a little later, he's got the highest upside in the draft of maybe any player in terms of how much different he could be from what we saw in college, which was a pretty good player, but a guy who I think never really fulfilled what he could be at the college level. He's certainly got the size, shape, speed pool that is all his own. 35.5-inch arms, 451 at 6'5", 272. You just don't get that kind of size out of an edge rusher ever. I mean, that's like Terrell Suggs' size with a lot more speed and even more arm length, where Terrell was good. All of his explosiveness metrics are off the chart. He is going to be, I think, coached into a better first step. Now, we just saw it happen to Odafe Owe this last year, a guy who didn't really have an impressive first step coming out of school. A lot of people would say, oh, that was assignment based. I don't really believe all that. I think he had kind of a slow get off. There are other things that Owe got better at in his rookie year. A little bit more natural bender he became, a more natural face crosser than we had seen at Penn State. I think we'll see things like that out of Trayvon as well. Offensive tackles against guys with his arm, will not get to use their punch moves. I can't even tell you how valuable that is. I mean, it's absolutely central. It means Walker is going to be dictating first contact a lot, and that's always a big thing you'll hear on my shows is that I really love defenders or tackles who can do that, and it's usually a big advantage. If the tackles who can get to the armpit consistently and lock up, and the rep is over. I mean, and they can do that 30% of the time. Say, just a huge advantage. The guys who can do that.
Ken, I love it. And for every reason you just said, and I'll add one more to it. I think positional versatility comes in to play for Walker as far as being able to handle guards. And Coach even mentioned that he thinks he could play 3-tech on a regular basis, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I will give it to Coach with that kind of length, power, natural ability. I just think he'd be a waste at 3-tech. I think
complete waste. I was thinking the same thing. It's just a complete waste. Could he do it? Sure.
Sure.
But complete waste to move him inside.
So Ken, but I have to ask you, obviously we both love these players here when we're getting into this range. I have Walker at number 4 on my board. For his upside, I think he's a player that will be a better pro than he showed at the college level, just because of those natural skills. And you get him in a chance where he could be a star of the defense, a focal point. I really think that he's going to get better and better. His athleticism is unmatched. So I wanted to ask you, just basically, other than your love for the players you have listed ahead of him, I wanted to dig in here because this might be like the biggest split that we have, with you having him at 8 and me having him all the way up at number 4. So if you could give me any, I want to call them negatives, but what's holding you back?
Okay, so the only thing I'd say is that he is a 1-year project at least to improve his level of play. So the Ravens will have to put him in, and what they would do is what they did with Owe last year, and they still didn't even work all the way through that project, even though Owe had a good rookie year. And I would expect something like that from Walker in terms of productivity and effectiveness, that you would get a player of approximately Owe's quality. But you're going to have to take him through and put him on the rush side, get him to figure out the things he's not doing well, whether it's run game, pass game, possibly just put him on the rush side as just a pass rusher initially, move him up to a guy who can play some additional rush side run snaps. So you get a few more snaps out of him. You can play him rotationally by series. You don't want everybody playing all of one type of snap, so you can rotate under any game circumstance too. Then you're going to put him on the Sam side, and what he can do on the Sam side could really help the team. Owe hasn't gotten there yet in terms of being a coverage guy. They really drop off the line. He's done it a few times, and there are sparkles every once in a while of things that he could do very well. Blocking a guy coming off the line of scrimmage and still coming as a delayed rusher and making something of that. With Walker, he's done some of this at Georgia, but he could do a lot more in a blitz scheme, which is much more complex and much more, the pass rush is much more scheme driven, to be a 2-gap stunt guy. And I would see Walker as the ideal over guy, whereas this is one of the reasons why I wouldn't bump him into 3-tech. I wouldn't a look at him as a guy who'd be an under guy. And it's a team that has, Wolf and Campbell and Matabika and some of the guys who have real under qualities that are good. This guy's an over, and I'd have him being the looper. He's got all the speed to do it. And you'd be excited about it. Even Owe is probably a better under guy than Walker is. And if you're going to line him up anywhere but on the edge, I'd line him up off ball and try and do some of the things the Ravens have done with players like Bowser to try and Judon to try and get him an advantage there. If he's going to do that, he has to have some coverage ability. So, he has to have some ability to react to a shallow cross. He's got to know what's happening with that tight end. He's got to read that off the line of scrimmage and take appropriate action.
So those are all valid questions. Where do you use them? But to me, Ken, I look at it more of a positive, because I believe that there will be someone on an opposing offensive line that Trayvon Walker is just too much for. Maybe even 2 guys, you know what I mean? Where you say, all right, well, passing downs, we're going to take advantage of this guard, and rush downs, we're going to take advantage of this tackle, or this left tackle isn't strong enough or long enough to handle Trayvon. This right tackle is too slow to handle Trayvon. So I use it more of a positive for him. Of course, there's going to be things that he has to work on. My main concern with Trayvon is the opposite of what we saw, or what I saw on Jermaine Johnson. Now, Ken, I've watched so much Georgia that I can't even tell you what game it was or where I'm drawing from. But I do see Trayvon Walker lose the ball a little bit, whereas Jermaine Johnson, his eyes are always on the ball. He's a step ahead. Trayvon seems a little more reactive, and I just wanted to know if you noticed any of that in your studies of him.
Yeah, he's not the same kind of an edge setter that he is, and going against modern option offenses. I can't believe we're saying that word, but that's the point we are in NFL history right now is going against modern option offenses and running quarterbacks and whatnot. He could lose the ball some, and he's going to have to learn how to do that. It's one of many things he's going to have to learn how to do really at the NFL level. I mean, even playing at Georgia, his results, I don't want to beat on him too much because he's clearly an incredible physical specimen. He's done some positive things at Georgia, but his results are really unacceptable given the players around him. I mean, it's an unbelievable defense, one of the greatest of all time. And, he has what are, modestly scored and, modest looking tape. If you look at his highlights, sure, he's great. If you look at him on a play-by-play basis, you notice the kind of things you're talking about, losing the football, not really maintaining containment properly, being more of a pass rusher than an edge setter, when he feels like it. I mean, there's things that stand out that I can't, they have to be trained out of him.
Gotcha. So if I could sum it up, I think this is fair to say the difference between Ken and I on where we're nitpicking, ranking these guys in the top 10 is that Ken feels he's a little more of a project than I do. I feel like he can contribute day one, wherever he's good at, wherever you find when you get him in the building. And Ken sees a lot of things that need work. And for that reason only, he has more polished prospects with the same upside. Is that fair, Ken? That fair assessment?
I think that's fair. I mean, we got one other guy on the list, I think, who's going to fall in the same category of he's a half to a 3/4 of a year project to get up to full speed.
Very fair. So Ken has Hamilton at 10, Jermaine Johnson at 9, Trayvon Walker at 8, and Stingley at 7. So I have all those players at 10 through 8. My number 7 guy, Ken, is Charles Cross, the tackle. Love his feet. I think he is a little undersized. I think as far as the run blocking, he'll have some work to do on there, but the Ravens need pass protection. I think Cross plays day one as a pass protector. And in many drafts, I would have him higher, but this is where we're starting to get into guys that I would just jump at and even maybe trade up a few spots, whisper, to get, because I love having the idea of having Charles Cross for 5 years of control. He's going to find a spot on this line within that time. Love his feet, love his versatility. Everything comes natural to him as far as when somebody's crossing his face, he can mirror someone. He can recover if he gets a step behind. Ken, literally the only, I want to say, non-dominant snaps that I saw from him was against Sam Williams, another guy who's going to find himself in the pro. So I consider Cross very clean with some upside when it comes to the run game. If you want to throw in where you have him ranked and give your thoughts on him, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, so we'll start with Cross. I have him ranked at number 6. So you had him at 7, we said here? Okay, so I'll give you my thoughts on Cross. Got the great arm length that I always love. There's something else he does that it really bothers me when I see tackles that do this. And it's probably worse for a tackle. It's bad for a guard too, by the way, bad for any offensive line position. But if you ever seen someone who plays pinball, and if you want to figure out if they're a really bad pinball player, if you want to make a small wager with them, say, don't need to do that. But if you want to find out if they're a really bad pinball player, they'll use both flippers at the same time to try and save the ball, as they cannot detect whether it's coming down the middle either way. I hate offensive linemen who always use two-handed punch techniques. So you want to see independent hand usage. On the defensive line, Perfect Raven, who's a great example of it, is Pernell McPhee. He's always going left, right, left, right, left, right in terms of hand usage, or he's got an unequal distance because he knows he gets additional length out of that, or he's got other things he's trying to do with his hand usage to fight the offensive player. I think Cross is very good with that. It's one of the reasons he's the guy I probably have the best hope of these top 10 guys might drop to 14 and the Ravens get him. That'd be really great. I don't think they could pass if he dropped to that point. You mentioned his mirror. I think it's probably the best mirror in the class, and how I would differentiate it from a Ronnie Stanley mirror, who's elite at the NFL level in terms of his ability to mirror guys, is Stanley's modus operandi has been to give ground with his mirror. So he steps in front, but as he goes through, he gives up a little bit of backing up, dying slowly, they call it if it's a center, dying slowly to the bull rush. But he gives up a little bit of ground. And part of that is who Lamar Jackson is, because Lamar Jackson takes a bump from the backside, from the blind side, better than any quarterback I've ever seen. Maybe better than any quarterback in NFL history, but definitely better than anyone who's playing currently. And he then can move and do what he needs to do to get out of the pocket. Charles Cross does not give up ground when he mirrors. He's amazing. He punches, drives defenders back often, and forces them to give up ground as he's mirroring them. It's just incredibly dominant left tackle play. So I love him in that respect. He doesn't have multiple years of good play. Didn't really play as well in 2020. His pedigree, though, is as a pass blocker. You're getting a left tackle. I want a pass blocker. The reason I like him a lot for the Ravens, and the reason why I think, if you want to pick a player who's worth trading up for, if he drops, say, to 12 and you really have to lay out some capital to get up, he might be the guy. And the reason would be that he addresses the Ravens' current left tackle concern, that they don't have anyone who can play that position other than Ronnie Stanley, and we don't know where Ronnie Stanley is right now. If they got Charles Cross, it would address that. It would be the insurance policy they need. Charles Cross certainly can play on the right side, and Morgan Moses can take a seat, frankly, if Charles Cross is available and ready to play, and Stanley is back and fully healthy, and the Ronnie Stanley of old. So I think you have a great situation on your hands if that comes to pass, and I don't think they mind wasting number 14 overall to get that kind of insurance when that's in fact exactly what cost the team a playoff berth last year.
Exactly, and you could argue 3 straight playoff exits were due to the fact of offensive line somewhere in there, definitely main factors. And Ken, this is the part of the draft where you're not going to like me on draft day. I'm going to try to refrain or hold myself, because one of these guys is mathematically going to have to drop, especially if we see Malik Willis or a quarterback or one of these wide receivers taken. And if Cross is sitting there at 11, even like 11, Ken, and I'm looking at a third or a fourth, I'm thinking, well, we have all these picks, Ken. We can recoup them. We can trade back later and just get Charles Cross on this team, So the question that I wanted to ask you, it's more of a statement that I would like you to follow up on is, I've seen, like, Daniel Jeremiah is one of my favorite analysts to listen to and to soak information from. And he's been very, I would say, tough on Cross. And it doesn't have anything negative to say, but his mock drafts and his top 50 rankings and everything, you see Charles Cross in the 20s sometimes. I think he's slowly worked up Jeremiah's board. And DJ's not alone on this. I've seen him in the teens and late teens, I should say. I don't see that, Ken. How about yourself, sir?
Yeah, I mean, my first question is, where does Daniel Jeremiah have Trevor Penning relative to those guys? Because Trevor Penning is so clearly the 4th best tackle in this draft. Maybe I should even put it differently. He's so clearly not in the same group with the 3 top tackles in this class. The 3 top tackles in this class, I think, are very difficult to differentiate. They all have their positives. Cross is probably the guy who will drop more if you look at consensus valuations of these players. But, I don't frankly see a whole lot of difference. I think they all got fantastic qualities. It did happen. I had the other 2 ranked ahead of them for the Ravens, but I'd be thrilled to get Cross at 14.
So if the Ravens traded up to 10, 11, are you willing to say, hey, let's trade back and recoup that value later? Or is that too much for you?
Okay. Let's put this in JJ value, because almost all trades are still made by JJ value. So if they trade from 14 to 10 and they'd be trading to Cleveland, the thing they'd have to give up is 4 of their 4th round picks. You willing to do that? Because that's what it would cost. That's 4 at approximately 50 each, and they're between about 35 and 65 in that round. So there's not I don't think that would be reasonable. I certainly wouldn't want to give that much juice to Cleveland to move back. I mean, Cleveland's going to get too good a player at 14.
I was thinking more of that, maybe pick 100, or instead of multiple 4ths, to give up a 3rd and maybe a 3rd next year or a 4th next year, to get creative. There's no way in this draft, Ken, that I'm giving up multiple 4ths.
Right. But by the way, I made a mistake. Cleveland already traded that pick to the Texans in the Deshaun Jackson deal. But I don't want to give it up to anybody. I mean, it's just there's too much value potentially in round 4, and I think this will be fun on the 3rd draft day. I think we'll have one of our most fun days, because we'll come into that, and I'm going to ask everybody out there to give me 8 players, let's say, or maybe 10 players who you would be thrilled if the Ravens got 5 of them with their 5 picks in round 4. And we'll see who can who can get some. And there's a lot of there's a lot of players of coincident value who will address the Ravens' need in that 4th round. And boy, it's going to be very key for the Ravens. I wouldn't want them giving up any of those picks unless they're trading back for additional picks or maybe 2023 picks.
Gotcha. Very fair. Just wanted to get your opinion on that out in the open, because it's good. There's going to be a lot of Ravens fans that are saying, why aren't we trading up? Why aren't we trading up? So just to give you an idea of what you would have to give up to get up so many spots. And it's something that we're going to be paying attention to very closely on your show. I know that, to see what would we have to give up. And then, of course, Ken, on draft day, a lot of times the price rises because teams are getting calls from multiple other teams, and okay, well, this team's willing to follow the JJ chart. Are you willing to go above that?
Right.
So what it takes to actually trade up is different year to year, and those prices seem to go up. So Ken, I guess it is time for me to give my number 6 guy, because you gave your number 6 guy. I have Stingley at 10, Hamilton at 9, Johnson at 8, Cross at 7. So my number 6 guy is the corner from Cincinnati, Sauce Gardner. I'm going to say my piece on him first. I think what I love about him and why I have him as my top corner is that he can play the tall receiver game. He can play the small receiver game. When he needs to play big, he can play big. If he's facing a route runner with quickness, it's uncanny the way he can mirror them at their size and almost transform himself. He's 6'2", listed at 6'2", but he can play like he's 6'4", and he can play like he's 5'10". And that kind of versatility, and I think that I mentioned to you, when I first started watching Sauce, I didn't want to like him. I'm like, okay, well, he's got this nickname. The general public likes him. I'm thinking, okay, he's probably overhyped because of all of this. He plays for Cincinnati. Let me go and dig in and be real critical. And I have to tell you, Ken, especially that Alabama game, I was just super impressed with the way he moved and covered those receivers. So if you want to tell me, where do you have Mr. Gardner on your list, and give me your assessment of him?
So I've got him at number 4. So I love the guy. He's easily the top corner in the draft. I think, by the way, he's been saying he's the best player in the draft. He might be right. I mean, he's absolutely dominant player. If you look at what he produced in college, just what he produced in college, he's been outrageous. Last 3 years, 0 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, a quarterback rating over those 3 years of 32.6 when throwing at his target. Now, a lot of people, quarterback passer rating doesn't come naturally or whatever, but 39.6 means all incompletes. So the opposing quarterbacks would have been better off grounding the football than trying to throw at Sauce Gardner for all those years.
You're saying that's a good thing. You're saying that's a good thing.
Good thing for him, yeah. Uses the sideline exceptionally well. Unbelievable at the catch point, meaning uncontested throws. 33.5-inch arms to go with the height. That 441 speed. This 33.5-inch arms. I mean, I'm arm length on a lot of positions here, but contested catches for corners are another one that's a big one for me. And he goes up and gets it. Very, very impressive. I don't see any way he drops to 14 for the Ravens. So at this point, we're just talking about an exercise in these top guys of kind of ranking them if in a fantasy world. But we are where we are. He'll bring turnovers to whatever team he goes to. The Ravens could really use them badly, but unless there's some sort of incident before then, which we would not wish upon him, something like happened to Laramie Tunsil, say, I don't think he's dropping to 14.
Me neither. I think there's a better chance of him going in the top 5 than there is even the top 8, or pick a number between 5 and 10. I think he's a top 5 type player. I have players ahead of him, and it's need-based, and that's part of the reason that I wanted to have you on the show. It's not the fact that the Ravens don't need a corner. We probably need 2. It's just the fact that when you have these edge rushers and the tackles that I have ahead of them, this is kind of why I wanted to hash this out with you, Ken, because I could easily have Gardner number 2 or number 3 on my list, and I'm having trouble trying to balance the talent of the player, who I think is the overall best player, or what the short-term and long-term need is here. So it's a great discussion. What do you have to add, Ken?
Yeah, there's one other thing for Gardner is that he's only an outside corner. He's not a guy you can put in the slot. Actually, you probably could put him in the slot, but like Humphrey in the slot, it reduces his value some because he's such an effective user of the sideline. The guy just bullies people to the sideline. Jimmy Smith did a good job of that, for many years for the Ravens. I think was well understood. Ike Taylor with the Pittsburgh was always a player who could just direct a receiver right out of bounds on a regular basis. If you put him in the slot, you'd lose that. And if they put Gardner on the outside for the Ravens, one of the things I probably dinged him 2 or 3 spots for was the fact that the Ravens would have to move Humphrey back to the slot. And I'm not really in favor of that. So actually, I didn't ding him 3 spots, but I might have dinged him 1 spot for that.
There you go. So for me, I dinged him a couple of spots too, just because the guys I have ahead of him I see as a perfect fit for what the Ravens have now. And, if I have to, maneuver around the board later to get the corner I want, I'm willing to have that if I can get one of my guys that I have listed ahead of Mr. Gardner. So, Ken, help me keep track. I'm not as organized as you. Did you give your number 6 was Cross?
I have not given my number 5. Have you given your number 5?
I haven't. So go ahead and surprise me because neither one of us have one.
Okay, so number 5 is Neil. Let me go over my notes on him here. One sec.
Prototypical looking tackle,
Yeah.
Ken. I'll pick it up for you while you search through your notes. But to me, I think he's a very safe player. I have one other tackle ahead of him because of the upside I believe in of that tackle. Yeah. But Evan Neal, go ahead and take it away, Ken.
Yeah, I really like him in terms of his build. Obviously, at 6'8", 337, 34-inch arms. He checks all the boxes that you'd want for a left tackle from that perspective. Very fast off the ball. One of the things that really struck me about watching his tape is just how well he keeps his feet spread. And you wouldn't think that's all that important, except we just watched Alejandro Villanueva play an entire season basically at left tackle, and the guy clicks his heels all the time. In fact, he crosses his feet sometimes. But whenever he does that, of course, he puts himself in a very disadvantageous position to get thrown out of the play, pushed off balance, pushed backwards extra by whoever's rushing against him. And don't think for a second that defenders aren't noticing that as the left tackle is getting their feet together. But Neal works with very small steps. He doesn't take large, small very often. I mean, he does react when he has to react, but generally speaking, when he's trying to mirror, it's small step to keep that mirror going. A lot of guys his size, I think, revert to 12-6 blocking to win against speed reps. Okay, so he's 6'8", 337. You got to figure there's a lot of guys, first of all, that not necessarily can beat him with speed. They can, but that can get underneath him. And if it's James Harrison and he's trying to get underneath a player like Neal, that would be a possibility. But in the games I watched, and particularly the Florida game, I really kept noticing this over and over again, is that he didn't really have to resort to that very often. He would do something very effective in terms of a punch or a mirroring move or whatever, even when people were trying to beat him with speed, that would be able to have him direct a guy south of the pocket oftentimes, but not have to do it by just pushing the guy free to do it. He could go right with him. So that's another I think of as a very positive quality, because it doesn't endanger your quarterback to a late hit if the play gets extended for further. And we've seen a few of those happen, certainly in recent times. Lunging would be maybe the one thing. He does a little bit of that, a little bit in level 2 when he's out there, which is not too often. Good chance I think he can be coached into reliance on his size better. Some of that is timing of his punch. Don't put both your arms out there. When the defensive end still has a chance to react and karate chop them both away, or use his A move to get by your two-handed punch that misses or connects only tangentially. I think he's an obvious choice to start at right tackle, move to left tackle in the future. He could even start at guard. So if you're satisfied with everybody along your line of scrimmage, but guard is the place where you need a guy, Moses is at right tackle, Stanley's at left tackle, and Evan Neal moves inside. He's played left guard, right tackle, and left tackle in the last 3 seasons, in fact, for Alabama. So he's another keep dreaming pick, but he's my number 5 guy. I another player that I just love entirely.
Me too. I love the safeness, the security, the consistency of Evan Neal. It's something that even from the first few snaps I watched of him, he looks so under control and looks like a pro. Mm-hmm. Doesn't look like he needs a lot of work to his game. He's very progressed already. And maybe that's why I see another tackle as having a higher upside than him, maybe even arguably Cross, but even that's kind of a stretch to me. I like Neal clearly better because when it comes down to protecting your quarterback, which is what you need the most out of your tackles, he does as good a job of it as probably the best in the class. He's just very under control, very steady. You mentioned the lunging. I did see that a little bit, but mostly in the run game when he's trying to move and reach somebody. It's like as under control as he is in the pass game, you don't get that feel when he's moving, trying to block someone on the run. But as far as his movements as a tackle, it's as natural as you want to get. Love the player. He's actually a little higher on my board at number 3. So I think that highly of him, and agree with you, Ken. No chance that a tackle with that kind of pedigree will be there. I think he's a top 5 pick as well as Sauce Gardner. Somebody's going to slip out of that top 5, but I cannot see it being Neal, and I don't think it's going to be Sauce either.
I would agree. So who's your number 5 guy?
So my number 5, and this is where I go against the grain with the experts, Ken. I have Aiden Hutchinson at number 5. I have Trayvon Walker, I mentioned, at number 4, back to back, right next to each other. And it's an upside versus safe thing for me too. So same reasons between why I have Ekwonu ahead of Neal. It's the same reason I have Walker ahead of Hutchinson. Hutchinson, much like Neal, same talking points, just a different position. He's going to be able to step in right away. He's going to be able to stop the run. He's going to be able to pressure your quarterback. He is going to play hard. Not the level of a Joey Bosa or Chase Young, excuse me. Not the level of player, I think, as far as upside goes. But if you're looking for a guy who's going to make Pro Bowls, a guy who's going to help your team, you can slide him inside a little bit if you'd like. Some positional versatility, I believe, with just his movement and the way he plays. But yes, love Aiden Hutchinson. I just don't think the guys I have above him I see as perennial Pro Bowlers, all pros under their belts. So that's why in a nitpicking world that is the top 10, top 5 of our list here, I have him at number 5, Ken.
Okay, well, fair enough. And I respect that as a judgment. I think there are reasons why if 2022 is not critical to you, that you would defer that you would value Hutchinson a little lower among some of these high upside guys that are otherwise available in this group. And I think this goes for several of the rest of the top 5. To me, the Ravens are drafting for 2022, not 2023. They're a team that is built to win right now. They're still on Jackson's rookie deal, of course. He's going to make better money this year, but he will still be fairly cheap. They have other players that are currently expensive, and it's a roster built, frankly, to win right now. Hutchinson is the surest bet of the edge rushers to come in and give you high production right off the bat. And so, as boring as it was, I have Hutchinson at number 1. And
okay.
I know this was what it was. I just kept looking at it. I can't justify anybody else because he's the guy. He's exactly what puts him at number 1 in terms of 2022 production is exactly the concerns about him, which is really kind of weird, is that he's very, very polished as a player right now. He's got fantastic tools, by the way, too. That 673 3-cone for a pass rusher is unreal. It's off the charts good. So do I think a player like Thibodeau might have a higher upside as a pure pass rusher? Yes, I do. But do I think that Aiden Hutchinson will bring you more in 2002? Yes, I do. 2022, yes, I do. And
okay,
my only long-term concern with Hutchinson besides polish is arm length, and he's at 32 1/8. That is quite short. There's a couple players in this draft that I feel like are rated a little bit above where they are in terms of what they'll provide career-wise. Hutchinson's one. The other one is probably a more serious concern because I think his variance of outcome at the pro level is a lot more based on that. That's Tyler Linderbaum of Iowa. Very, very short arms at center, and it could be a real problem for him in his career. Otherwise, everybody loves him for everything he's done at the college level, and he's got a lot of quickness. But to me, he's that arm length could get him in a lot of trouble. I think what Hutchinson does, the other area of polish is, I've heard Phil Simms talk about edge rushers going and taking karate a lot, learning these fast hand movements. He's unbelievable quick and heavy with his hands. That combination just absolutely deadly. Doesn't have to go to the body. He's a good hand swiper. Got real good cross chop. Got a whole series of pass rush moves already at his disposal. Again, that speaks to the polish, but also speaks to 2022. He's the guy I really want.
There's a couple of guys in this draft who do the same thing as far as negating their arm length by just using their hands really, really well. So, Cam Thomas is a favorite of mine that I have higher on my list that others don't. But it just speaks to what you were saying: heavy hands, active hands, quick hands. good luck getting even a single arm extension, like you were talking about, using that one arm, knowing what's coming. Hutchinson's got some skills. Now, I think we should bleed this conversation into Thibodeau, because why I have Thibodeau ahead of Hutchinson, I mean, not he's the only one rusher edge ahead of him, is because I've seen Thibodeau play on the right side. I've seen him on the left side, seen him with his hand in the dirt, seen him standing up. I've seen him rush the passer. I've seen him drop into coverage effectively. So although Hutchinson profiles to be able to do anything you want on the football field, I've actually been able to see Thibodeau do it and cover effectively. And we know if somebody's going to play Sam, if we're assuming the Raven system is going to be the same, they're going to be able to drop in coverage. So are there any concerns from you as far as the versatility of Hutchinson being able to move around like we've saw from Thibodeau?
He's not an obvious Sam player. I think you keep him at rush. I don't think you have any concern about him run or pass from the rush side, and I think that's good enough. I think the Ravens get by with Owe and Bowser as their new Sam linebacker pairing, with Owe being more versatile than that and able to move wherever you really need him.
Okay, very good. So we've all revealed our top four. I had Walker at 4, right ahead of Hutchinson. You had Sauce Gardner at number 4. So we're missing your number 3 and your number 2, Ken. So who do you have at number 3? I know I can guess the players, but what order do you have them in here?
Sure. So Thibodeau's my number 3 guy, and I didn't really talk about him just now when you did. So let me do that. A lot to love about him. His length is only okay at 33 1/8, but he makes up for it by an unbelievable first step. Really wins hand placement despite his lack of length versus longer opponents, which I really like to see that. And you mentioned this, there's so many of these shorter arm players, and he's not a real extreme case of that, being over 33 inches, but there's so many of these shorter arm players who've learned these survival techniques, I think, but they're the polished shorter arm players at the college level that I would still be worried about. Thibodeau is really not in that class because he didn't, his extraordinary speed off the ball to negate that is kind of bringing a different and very valuable skill set to the table. It's not him polishing up a turd in terms of arm length and trying to do something with hand fighting or whatever that might get past that a little better. If for a man his size, he gets low around the edge very well. So when he got his shoulder under the offensive tackle's outside arm, the QB was going down. He might get the ball off, but he's going down. Either way, did not really see offensive tackles respond with 12-6 moves on that. Some people call that, bend, and bend was a part of it, but he just also has an ability to just be in the armpit with his head or his shoulder of that opposing offensive tackle. I didn't really see, by the way, how many holding calls he draws in a typical year, or he drew in as a college player. But he strikes me as a Harrison-esque player who would draw a bunch of holding calls because of that speed and the way he would end up, in a natural chokehold of the offensive tackle opposite him.
I agree. And man, if we could just get a little bit of that get off the snap into a Dafio way, we'd have an unstoppable player. Because Thibodeau is as good as I've seen. I mean, there have been other players who do it well, but Thibodeau is a lightning bolt coming off the ball. It almost seems like he's the center. Like he knows when exactly the split second when the ball is being snapped, and he puts tackles in compromising positions right away. Ken, he would be the guy, if I had to put a few dollars down on, that he would be my defensive rookie of the year, because I think he's going to catch people with some sacks. Of course, he's going to, get his share of tackles and everything. But as far as making an immediate splash and having something to prove, I mean, this guy has been slipping down boards because of things that have nothing to do with, I don't want to say nothing to do with on the field, but more of his attitude, like we were talking about with Stingley. So he's seeing all this, and I bet you he comes to the NFL very motivated. It could be quite possible that he is another one of those guys who put out what he had to put out on tape, and just kind of where they say taking off snaps and all this other stuff. Maybe that's a part of it. And of course, the outside interest, I said this to somebody else, if you're going to bang on somebody for having outside interests and they're being about their brand, you could probably do that for about 40 or 50 players, because the guys who know that they have a future in this league, they're all thinking about it. It's just a different time. So I'm trying to, even at my, living through the 90s and all that other stuff, to try to get with the program. And it doesn't bother me one bit as far as the off the field interest. I want to know if he's at practice on time, if he's committed, if he's studying tape, all that other football stuff. I don't care what his interest is in his free time, Ken.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you go by what's on the field. If there were elements of his play on the field that clearly linked to bad habits off the field, I wouldn't like that. I think we have some of that with Trevor Penning in this thing that I personally, whether correct or not, his ridiculous penalty total, if his coaches didn't say anything about him, they're fools. So they must have at some point during his career. And he still couldn't clean it up and had 5 personal fouls this year. That he might as well write bonehead in a Sharpie marker on his forehead, from that kind of play. So I'm not seeing that from Thibodeau. And, the other guy that they really called out fairly regularly for taking snaps off was Randy Moss. So I'm not too concerned about it.
And Haloti Nada, I remember that. That was the reason he dropped. I remember this for sure, Ken. So
okay,
Rich, you have to trust me on this. Yeah, trust me on this.
Nada became an Iron Man in the NFL. So, and you don't become an Iron Man playing for the Ravens if you're taking snaps off. They're a natural rotational team, so they play you less if you need rest. But that's an interesting one. I think the problem with Nada, I think it was mapped maybe to taking plays off, but it was really playing too high, and the Ravens got him to play lower and be even more effective than he had been in college.
And I remember this from Nada's retirement press conference, or when he announced he was going to retire as a Raven, and they told him he was going into the Ring of Honor. And it speaks to the leadership from your best players, because he remembers his first practice. He recalled this. It was either his first practice or early on in his practice where he made a mistake and he had that darn moment instead of the run to the ball moment. And he said that Ray in particular and Suggs were like, we don't care if you make a mistake. You're going to make mistakes. Run to the damn ball. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it just kind of takes that mentality, like take the pressure off. You're going to make mistakes. Just play hard. Play hard. If you make a mistake, so be it. You can make up for it the next play. Let's have that short memory. So there could be a ton of reasons for inconsistent play, what people view as inconsistent play. So, Ken, I wanted to ask you, just in your professional opinion, from what you noticed about the NFL, because there's no way that we know this, what are the chances that Thibodeau could slip like we're seeing some people predict him to slip, just based on you interview him and he's not giving the company answer every time?
I'm really not privy to how many teams would really write him off entirely for a bad interview. You mark him down, but a player like Thibodeau, he's too good. So, could a team really say, okay, you know what? We're docking him 15 spots. We won't draft him before number 20. It'd be crazy to me for that to happen. So the notion of him dropping to 14, I think it's still a very, very much a long shot. Not completely out of the realm of possibility. There are 4 edge rushers. It also depends partly on what teams need in that part. And somebody out there, some front offices may have it with Thibodeau being the 4th of the 4 behind Johnson, Trayvon Walker, if they want the higher upside potentially, and Hutchinson.
Well, Thibodeau is number 2 on my board overall. I just love him. He looks like a Ravens prototype linebacker who you can move around and ask to do different things at a very high level. And he's got that, rare blue chip talent that, there's very few people. He'd be a top 10 in any draft if he put on with the tape that he's put out there. I truly believe that about Mr. Thibodeau. Any final thoughts on him before we move on to our last player here, because we've narrowed it down?
Have we? So we've named everyone except my number 2 and your number 1, I guess.
Number 1. He's my number 1. Yes, sir.
Well, you think more about him. Why don't you go first with your comments?
Okay. So Keem Akwanwu, love him. I love his upside. Again, compared to Evan Neal, I mentioned it earlier in the show. I think that this guy has the ability to be the best left tackle in the game. And I just want to tell the story real quick, Ken, and maybe have you respond to this very quickly before I keep going on. But when I looked at him first, I'm looking at, okay, he's not 6'8". Okay, I can tell he's not the prototype. He's a little wider than you would see some of these long, tall tackles. And I'm looking, very critically as far as, okay, how's his feet? Is he going to be one of these guys that they're going to label a tackle, but he's more of a guard? And Ken, after about 20, 10, 15, 20 snaps, I didn't really even care at that point. Like his feet, his movement of his feet, his nastiness, and his ability. I watched him out in space on a couple of blocks, squaring up linebackers and safeties. And I'm like, this guy is going to be definitely in my top 14, at that point in the early stages, without even caring whether he's going to be a guard and a tackle. So could you just comment on that part of it? Did you have a similar experience when you were watching him?
He's very dominant as you see him immediately. The positional versatility is why I like him for the Ravens. So I'll stay away from that for a moment and go in the response. You mentioned about his feet. He and Cross both have some wide to narrow in their feet. That's not like Neal. Neal has really got the best feet in the class. But I still like Aquano, and he plays with pretty damn good balance. But the wide to narrow, he has a little bit of it. It's not terrible. It's not heel clicking, but when he overreacts to a move, he can get narrower in terms of how close his feet are together, and that compromises him slightly against opposing pass rushers. But generally speaking, pancake waiting to happen for a defensive tackle on a down block. Love that. And love what he brings to level 2 as well with his quickness. So I'm sorry, I don't want to hog this. You go first, and then I'll respond.
No, it's great, Ken, because I've talking to him. I'm sure the people who watch the channel have heard how much I love him. But number 1 player on my board, number 2 player on your board. Again, the versatility that he could bring. I mean, he's a guy that if Stanley's healthy, he'll start at left guard, or he'll start at left guard for us probably. He's just that good and that versatile. And you mentioned feet not as good as Neal's. Where I would push back, I would say in pass protection, Neal's got the best feet. But as far as a mover in space and staying under control, quickness, speed, that's what I'm talking about with Aquanu, and why I see his upside as high as anybody else. Number 1 on my board. So all things equal, if we had the first pick, this would be my guy. You have him at number 2. So we're speaking the same language here when it comes to him. What about for people who would say that they want that more traditional left tackle in Neal, who you have a few spots lower than Aquanu?
I got no problem if they do that. The Ravens have a okay. So if the Ravens draft him, he solves a lot of problems for the Ravens. So first of all, he's versatile enough to you play guard. You're not wasting the draft pick somehow, or maybe he plays right tackle and Moses sits. Either one, or somebody gets hurt and he plays wherever he's needed, because he can certainly jump right in there at left tackle from day 1, I believe. The amount that the Ravens pull from tackle, whether he's on the right side or the left side or at left guard, obviously, because that position pulls more than any, he's going to pull a ton, and he's going to be incredibly effective at it, given his apparent on-field quickness, not just his 40 time, but just his quickness in terms of, getting quickly off the ball and what he does. You're almost wasting him in a sense when you pull, because he's so good at knocking back the guy directly across from him on the line of scrimmage. But again, the Ravens have a power run game. They like to pull out, and he'll be an incredibly effective force on the run from either guard or tackle. So I like him from that perspective. Lots of sand in the pants, so he's built proportionally well for an offensive lineman anywhere. He looks good for a guard, looks good for a tackle, whatever you want. So there are not many tackles in the NFL now who have what he brings to the table. I know there are people who say he'll end up at guard. I don't see that at all. I think he's your left tackle. He's the guy you want there. And I think what he hasn't done yet as a pass blocker, or the areas where he is not quite as good as Neal, he can certainly improve in that way. And playing with Lamar Jackson, I really don't see any problem having him at left tackle.
Yeah, important, Ken, to know how he fits on your team and what else is around him. But absolutely, like Lamar Jackson eases my concerns for Charles Cross as well. When you're talking about that mirroring, and okay, maybe Cross doesn't have the best anchor and that kind of stuff. Well, with Lamar Jackson as your quarterback, obviously that doesn't matter. And with Aquanu, I mean it. I mean, if Stanley is 100% healthy, Aquanu will still start on this
Mhm.
line. I mean, you would want somebody that you would take theoretically in the top 5 or even at 14 to start. I mean, you don't waste you. It would be a waste of draft capital if he didn't. But I truly mean it. Like if Stanley was healthy and everybody else is healthy, he's probably your right tackle. Or you could get a little creative and put him at guard. You could, if Zeitler went down, he might be your best right guard. Not that you
Oh
would play
yeah,
him, but I'm just saying you could. There's an argument for every position he would be better than what the Ravens have than Ronnie Stanley, 100% old school Ronnie Stanley.
right.
Uh, what an asset that would be. But we're dreaming on that, Ken. I don't see him slipping at all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he won't. I did see some earlier things where there was a little bit of slippage and he might have dropped. But I'm like, this would be incredible if they would if it would happen, but it ain't happening. There's one thing that there are 3 tackles in this class. One I actually classify as a guard, but there's really 3 tackles in this class who have a certain characteristic that I love, and all of them are very frequent pancakers at the college level. Aquanu has it in spades. Trevor Penning has it in spades, and the guy at Kentucky,
How about
Darian.
Tyler Smith? How about Tyler Smith though too? I might throw him in there.
That's a fair one, but the guy I'm thinking of is
It's Kennard.
Darian Kennard. Yes, Darian Kennard of Kentucky. They knock a guy down, particularly on a down block, and they want to stand over the body, and it's almost like I want to stand here and eat your heart out, to do this. And it's like there's a level 2 block to be had here. You didn't have to stand there. That you finished that opponent. Now you can get credit for another if you want. As someone who always gives a highlight block on a level 2 block, but when it's a coincidental pancake, I don't even give a pancake. If you have help from one other player, it just annoys me to see players do that. But they can coach that right out of him. I'm not sure they can coach that out of Penning as quickly, but they can coach it out of him. I really like him as a player, and I do love the violence in his game to try and get those pancakes. I just wish he'd do more afterwards.
Well, yes, Ken, and it's some for a lot of people. Penning is a loose cannon. You have to call it what it is. But when the game situations become more important, when the games become more important, when it creeps into the fourth quarter, you're looking to do what you need to on your team. Whereas early in the game, sometimes you want to intimidate somebody and let them know you're going to be there all damn day, and this is going to be a problem. And I just talked about Coach with Pickens, the wide receiver. Whereas, he will block somebody to the ground and stand over him. And to me, I'd like that instead of looking for work. If you're going to do that early in the game, it's kind of like an outfielder showing off his arm and just zooming it to second base when there's no play at second base. It's kind of like, hey, buddy, if you're going to half step and take a play off, I'm going to punish you. We're not going to have any, you call it gentleman's agreement. There's no gentleman's agreement going on over here away from the play. I will flatten you, embarrass you, and stand over you if you're not careful. So yeah, some of that bothers me as far as, yes, you want to see them continuing with the block, but considering the time in the game, maybe I can understand that a little more.
Okay, let me give you the opposite side of this, and I really do love this as well. Miles Boykin, obviously, is not going to be with the Ravens this year, but unbelievable positional blocker. And what I think you see from guys who are a little bit smaller than Boykin is Boykin always kept his feet very well as a blocker, never lunged, always extremely good, extremely positional, keeping guys at arm's length. And it's so effective. It was making defensive backs corners a lot of the time, but even safeties just give up on the play. I mean, they'd allow themselves to be pushed 10 yards back by Boykin because they didn't want to take a pancake from him. That could be even more valuable. Don't create trash or pins in the lane, if you want to call it that. That's a really old analogy. Just to create problems in space. I like to see that too, and that's more of what I consider pure blocking. I think it's very intimidating defenders as well. But I understand the other point that you say. Gloves are off. We don't want to. We're not playing handball here.
Yes, and pins in a lane, in my opinion, Ken, just my opinion,
Yeah.
is still a relevant term because we are in Baltimore here. I'm in
Duck pin.
Dundalk. This is duck pin land here in
Yeah, there
Dundalk,
you
sir.
go.
So we understand about that trash in the lane. So, uh, so Ken, man, what a great discussion. I really appreciate it. Do you have any final thoughts on the draft as it relates to the top of the draft? I would just love to hear anything you had to say as it relates to the Ravens, their position, and maybe some of the players we mentioned. Or is there anybody else? This might be a two-part question, so go ahead. Is there anybody else that we did not talk about tonight that you think deserves to be in that top 10?
I think we have pretty much the top 10 for the Ravens. McDuffie, would he be a guy that would be in that discussion for the Ravens? I think he would be at 14. Probably not in the top 10. I think they have to be, very careful with what they're drafting. If they had the 10th pick and McDuffie might be the player who would fit them best at that point, I think trade down and you still get him and you recover some additional draft capital. Very important to be extremely efficient in round one. I think we've had this discussion before, but you really need to be at the nexus of value and need when you pick. If you're not, think very carefully about trading down. There's usually teams who want to do it, and oftentimes the gain will be worth more than the efficiency lost by a reach pick. It's good general managers don't do that, and the Ravens are among those that have just over the years they've rarely made that mistake. So I know this is going to upset people, but I think the Ravens are probably if they change their order in the first round and don't pick 14th, I think they're probably 7-3 favorites. Maybe more than that, maybe 4-1 favorites to move down rather than up.
Very good. Coming from an actuary, you didn't go 8-2. You went right to 4-1.
Right,
You
there you
dumbed
go.
that down. That was very, very well said. But Ken, in all seriousness, I've said the same thing. Now, for me, I'm going to go ahead and put my big board on the screen now. Ken, you won't be able to see it, but I'll be editing this later. I have Wyatt at 11, Davis at 12, London at 13, and McDuffie at 14. That's my top 14. So I love those other players. I think London changes our offense, which is going to be a discussion. People would disagree with taking a wide receiver that high. But if it comes down to those guys, Ken, I am a big favor and in favor of trading back, because if you look at the guys I have below there, for the viewers out there, imagine getting two of those guys instead of a McDuffie. Pick out any two from the green section there, or even the purple section if you like the players. And imagine the Ravens landing two of those guys. Ken, to me, long story short, this would be a great draft to trade back if the Ravens can't get what they want at 14, and they can do it. I mean, you would be looking at another impact starter from day one, someone that would help the team both in 2022 and in 2026 or 7, whatever the 5 years out would be.
So are you talking about getting two picks for one? Maybe they get pick number 31 and pick number 40, because that would be an equivalent JJ total to their number 14 pick.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
That'd be exciting.
Because somebody's going to slip, Ken. Somebody you have in your top 24, 25. I have 24 in one particular section, but one of those guys is going to be there, probably 2,
Right.
3, or 4 at that 32 spot or whatever you said. And then, of course, you move up and get a higher player at around 40. So however that shakes out, trading back in a nutshell would net the Ravens an extra impact player, a day one starter, and a long-term piece. So I love that.
Right.
Well,
So
Ken,
would you
go
trade
ahead, buddy.
would you trade any of the first round value to reset your draft for 2023 with some of that value? So you have 1,400 to trade. Let's say you could get back something that was worth 1,100 this year, and I don't know how far back. Let me make sure I'm talking correctly here. Okay, so the number 14 pick is worth 1,100. Let's say they move back to 21, which is worth 800, but also pick up a pick that's worth 400 next year, which would be like picking up the 50th overall pick in 2023. So obviously there's some doubt about where teams will finish, but you'd be thinking about picking up the 50th pick in next year. Would you do something like that given where the Ravens are and the dearth of draft picks they're going to have next year? No compensatory picks next year for the Baltimore Ravens, by the way.
Yeah, so this is something that I would have to defer to someone who knows more about next year's draft than I do. So, I don't have a strong opinion on this, but from my perspective, and maybe this is just me being impatient, I'm looking at the second and third round of this year's draft as stronger than most other years. So
Mm-hmm.
a number 70 pick this year would be equal to me to a number 50 pick next year, as far as just the sheer talent level of the players available. So in a short answer, I would say no. I want my picks in this draft. If anything, I'm going to trade next year's pick to move. If I had to make a move up, say a player you would never expect is sitting there, and he's going to go within the next, if not next pick, but the next 2 or 3 picks, I would say, hey, let me give you something from next year's draft to include in that, so I can keep my guys, my picks that I have in this draft, because I just love this draft, the middle to the, that I want to say late first all the way to early 5th round. Everybody in that range, you're going to get an above average player when you compare them to drafts of the past.
Well, they got nine picks in that range, and we're going to really enjoy them on the show. We do. So we'll be thrilled about that. I think I agree with you logically that the post-COVID draft that this is, there are reasons why the draft quality might not be duplicated for several years, and why you wouldn't really want to trade for another pick next year at some points. But I also think that next year they could well have very little draft capital going into that draft, and they're going to really need it.
Yeah, the compensatory picks missing is something that we're not used to as Ravens fans, but it just worked out. We had a really good draft in 2018, but yet the values that we've seen from even a Deshaun Elliott, but especially Bradley Bozeman, Anthony Averett, Ken, I would have thought that they would have got paid more. Quite honestly, if you would have asked me in November, say, I would have said they would have got much higher contracts than they got. Tavon Young, another one, even with his injury history, what was it, a 1.3 1-year contract? It's like, geez whiz, man. What happened to our compensatory picks? They're absent this year. And of course, we already made the big signing of Marcus Williams. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was counts against the comp formula, right?
Yeah, I mean the Ravens are out of any contention for comp picks at this point, but I probably shouldn't say that. Maybe there's some way they can backdoor a comp pick in a later round that I don't know about. But they've already signed several free agents, so I don't believe so.
Me neither, and it's not going to be that 3rd, 4th round comp pick that we're used to. It would be the end of the line. So, but yeah, so. Ken, I really appreciate you taking all this time to come on my channel and support me, man. It just means the world to me. Always a high level discussion, and we get into some of the nooks and crannies of the player, but again, for all the time that all the work that you do for the Ravens community doesn't go unnoticed. Life is a finite. We only have so much time, Ken. So it meant a lot to me to be able to say that to you on the channel, and just let you know how appreciated you are, not just from me, but from people that I interact with. And they love your show. They love the dedication that you show going out there to training camp, putting out all this material, 24/7, 365, so to speak.
Hey, I appreciate it, Jason. And I love talking football with you. It's never a waste of time. It's always worthwhile. And this was one of them. So what do we go, 35 minutes here? Oh, it's 35. An hour and 23.
Yes.
So
yes.
This is what always happens when we start talking football, is it runs over. And that's because it's such a joy, my friend. So I'm really looking forward to doing the draft show with you. And I think we'll have a lot of fun with that. I hope as many people as possible will join us. And, our typical combined shows per year is what, about 15 now, maybe? So,
who knows? It might go up from there, Ken.
Looking forward to it, my friend.
All right. With that, I'm going to say thank you to my football family. Love my football family. Thanks to everybody out there. And please join us on draft night. I will have a video up probably right before the draft where someone can find a link to Ken's stuff. Maybe I'll put my big board out there. I'll find some way for my YouTube family to be able to get connected to Ken and our big show on there. So with that, Ken, I always ask my guests to say goodbye to the people, sir.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Goodbye, everybody.